This is my talk, The Importance of Laughter. My name is Aino Corry. I'm 51 years old, I think, and I come from Denmark. I really like to laugh, as Preben said, so I tried to look at things in my photo where I'm laughing. And I found this picture of myself when I was a young girl. You can see that I'm laughing. I'm upside down, so it might look wrong for you, but actually I'm smiling. And this is me with my kids. We're at the beach in Denmark in the summertime. And this is me with my husband also at the beach in the summertime in Denmark. Now, you probably know one thing about Denmark, and that is that we are the happiest people in the world. Or at least we have been. The Finns have overtaken us. I don't understand how that is. That must be hacking. Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to talking about myself again. So the Danish people are the happiest people in the world. Do you know why the Danish people are the happiest people in the world? It's the good weather. It's the high taxes. Bacon, it's the great bacon. It could be any of those things. It could be any of those things. But actually what it is very low expectations. We have extremely low expectations to life, which makes us very happy. So I can instantly make you happy right now if your expectation is to listen to a tall Danish woman standing here talking about the importance of laughter for 40 minutes, you will be happy. It's as easy as that. Why do you want to listen to this? There are 3 takeaways from this talk. You want to be funny, you're interested in why people are laughing, what they're laughing at, and you want to hear the funniest joke in the world. And because I know that your attention span is so short, I'm going to start with the funniest joke in the world. Because, I mean, then if you go into a Twitter hole, at least you'll get that out of it. So the scientifically proven funniest joke in the world. Of course, it's a British researcher who made this research about the joke. So he set out to find the funniest joke in the world, more than 40,000 jokes, more than 1.5 million ratings. And it goes like this. 2 hunters are out in the woods when one of them collapses. He's not breathing, his eyes are glazed, so his friend calls 112. My friend is dead, what should I do? The operator calmly replies, calm down, sir, I can help. First, make sure that he's dead. There's silence, then a loud bang. Back on the phone, the guy says, okay, now what? It is the funniest joke in the world. Great, thank you very much. I appreciate it might take some time, but we got like 1/3 out of the takeaways now already, so that's great. We just 2/3 less. So I want to talk about the middle part. Why do people laugh and what do they laugh at? I'm going to talk about it as the story of my life. So in short, the story of my life is there was childhood, then I started presenting at stages, and then I started facilitating. That's the story of my life. Well, there's also 3 children and 2 marriages, but these are the important things. So the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said, livet skal leves forlæns, men forstås baglæns. And of course I had it translated to Dutch. Het leven moet voorwaarts geleven worden geleefd, maar moet achterwaarts worden begrepen, or something like that. Thank you. Actually, you should thank Banter. They're the ones that helped me with this pronunciation. Also, blame them if it wasn't correct. In English, for those of you who don't understand Danish or Dutch, it means that the life is lived forwards, but you have to understand it backwards, which means that we're going to turn my life story around. We're going to start with facilitation, then presentation, and then the childhood. So, facilitation. This is something I've been doing for more than 15 years, and this is also what I wrote that depressing book about. That book is not funny, it's depressing. Just so that you know it before thinking about buying it. So this is a picture of facilitation setting where I was facilitating for 110 people, 14 teams, 140 different software systems. And they needed to be facilitated into creating new teams around these software systems. And when you're facilitating things like this, you really need humor. I always try to start with an icebreaker where people are laughing together. It makes them feel more like a togetherness. And also, I know that transformation can be painful, and in order to get that pain away, I want them to laugh. So I try to make people laugh at the beginning of the facilitation, during the facilitation, and at the end of the facilitation. Most importantly, when I facilitate retrospectives, I make use of the fact that laughter can actually diffuse difficult situations, mask nervousness, soften criticism, and cope with failure, which is exactly what you need when you're facilitating a retrospective. It's enormously important to laugh at a retrospective, I think. If there's nothing to laugh at in the sprint or the project, you can make them laugh at you. Like you can say something stupid or surprising. You can make them laugh at somebody else. It's always nice to laugh at somebody else. In the good old days, we used to laugh at Microsoft. It was so nice and warming. Now we're laughing at Google. It's equally wonderful. And soon, I think we'll be laughing at Twitter. So we've got something to look forward to. But laughing is really important when you're in a difficult situation. And actually, there's been a lot of research in what's actually happening when you're laughing, what's happening with humor. So you know that the brain has this frontal lobe, and then you have this cerebral cortex. And the cerebral cortex is a bit like Switzerland of the brain. If it wasn't so wrinkled, it would be really big. And what happens when you hear something funny is that the frontal lobe is deciding whether you get the joke or not. And if you get the joke, the frontal lobe will be sending electric signals down to the cerebral cortex, which will set your body in a state of laughter. So maybe you're having these involuntarily cramps in your stomach where you go like, whatever kind of laughter you have. It could be hysterical, it could be a little smirk. But anyway, something happens in your brain, something happens in your body when you're laughing. And the physical importance of laughter has also been researched tremendously. So one of the things that I read about was Karl Marcy from Harvard. He said that apart from the muscle workout that you get when you're laughing, because you remember when you were young, you had these days where you were laughing so much that your stomach ached. Maybe you're still working somewhere where you laugh so much so that your stomach aches. If you do, then stay in that job, because that's a great job. But besides that, there's also other things happening. And Karl Marcy looked at what is happening in you physically that actually creates something mentally for you. And what he noticed is that when people are laughing, it's actually as good as antidepressants, because it's raising the serotonin levels in your body. And you know that the serotonin is a crucial transmitter for feelings of well-being and calmness. But it's not just the serotonin that goes up when you're laughing. It's also the endorphin, the dopamine, and the oxytocin. And you know, to get some of the other happiness hormones in your body, you need to work hard, or you need to have pain, or you need to do something. But you can also just laugh, and then you feel really good about it. So there's a great physical importance of laughter that actually has an impact on your mental well-being. Because there's also other research in laughter that says, well, there's also a psychological impact. And that means that if you're working, for instance, as a firefighter or in an ER room, it's very important to have a good sense of humor. Because if you have a good sense of humor, then you're able to diffuse these difficult situations. You're able to get the intensity down. If you're very intense in a situation, you can't use your intellect. So you need to get the intensity down so that you can actually start working in the right way. And I would say that if you're a language designer, I think you also need a great sense of humor, especially if it's C++. You do recognize who this is, right? Who recognizes who this is? Yeah? Bjarne Stroustrup, yes. And he was actually at the same university that I was at a little bit before. So the next part of my life is presenting. Now, when you are presenting, you also need humor. Because when people are laughing, they will remember what they're hearing a lot better than if they're not laughing. And if they're laughing, if they think that there'll be something funny at some point, they will not be looking at their phones, they will not be looking at their computers, they will be listening to you because they don't want to miss that funny part. I've been teaching computer science at the university for 18 years, and I know what it looks like when the students have fallen asleep. So that's why I try to put in some humor from time to time. Sometimes voluntarily, sometimes not so voluntarily. 3 things that are important besides the laughter when you're giving talks is logos, pathos, and ethos. You probably remember this as the Aristotelian modes of persuasion from 2,500 years ago. And Aristotle said that if you want to persuade somebody about something, if you want to explain something, if you want them to listen, then you need all these 3. The first one, logos, is what you're saying. Do you actually know what you're talking about? It's pretty important that you know what you're talking about. Also, pathos, how excited are you about what you're talking about? How interested are you in it? If there's something we learned about the internet, is that if we're looking at somebody who's excited, we get excited, right? So if you're really bored about your subject, then other people will be bored about the subject. I had to teach databases, didn't have a lot of pathos then, it was really boring. Ethos is also important. It's who you are, who they think you are. Do they respect you already, or do you have to work for that respect? It's great if you have all 3 as a speaker, but you can actually get along with only 2 of them, right? Because if you know what you're talking about, and you're really passionate about it, then it doesn't matter that they don't respect you from the outset, they will learn to respect you during the talk. You have to work a little bit harder, but that's fine. If people respect you, and you know what you're talking about, it's okay if you're boring, because they will be listening anyway. And the interesting thing, which I'm sure you haven't seen this at this conference, but if you're a big name, and you're interesting on stage, it doesn't really matter if you don't know what you're talking about, because people will be interested in listening to you anyway. So you just need 2 out of 3 when you're giving a talk. And another thing that's important when you're giving a talk is that you can start with self-deprecating humor. Start saying something a little bit downsizing about yourself, then people will like you a bit more. For instance, I started running half marathons when I was 40 years old, and on my first half marathon, there was an 80-year-old man who overtook me, and he clapped my shoulder and he said, "Thank you." And I smiled and I said, "Why you already worked it out, have you?" I didn't work it out. I said, "Why are you thanking me?" And he said, "Because you're the first one I overtook in this run, and I've been running for an hour." So this is a self-deprecating joke, but also a bragging joke. You see, you can put both things in it. So this leads me to the first video. So he was using this self-deprecating humor by saying that he probably isn't a best man, because the last time he did it, they got divorced. And he also used this, that he said he wanted to say something which was really important, and some people might not want to listen to it, but he had a cliffhanger with a joke. We really wanted to hear what kind of skeletons he had in his cupboard. And it's very typical for British people to use this kind of self-deprecation when they start giving talks. But actually you can find it in American people as well. Now, George Bush, in one of the commencement addresses that he gave at universities, you know, those fancy talks where you talk to all the people who finished university degree, he said, "For those of you graduating with high honors and distinctions, I say, well done. And as I like to tell the C students, you too can be president." And I think that was very ironic by George Bush. And of course, it is based on the fact that we all knew that George Bush was not a very intelligent president. And now somebody else have put him in the corner about that, of course. They've done better. But it's interesting to see how he uses self-deprecation to make people laugh, even though he was the president, and then go on so they're listening to him. So we laugh to show that we understand. We laugh to make people see I got that joke. How many of you were in Kevlin Henne's keynote this morning? Great. So you probably noticed that he used this kind of humor a lot. A lot of the things that Kevlin said was making you laugh, both because it was funny, but also because if you laughed, you showed other people, I understand this. One example could be, you mean they're programming driverless cars in JavaScript? So that made a lot of people laugh, because they know what we say about JavaScript, and they know what we mean when we say that. Another thing he said was, I knew they were bilingual in Canada, but trilingual, English, French, and PHP. That's also something where we are laughing because we know that they're bilingual, and we know that this is PHP. And then when we start laughing, other people will laugh as well. So that's a social laughter. I'll come back to that. So this is something that you can use when you want to be funny. You say something that people have to laugh at to show that they understand things. But we also laugh to show that we belong. This is a way of showing who we belong together with. I was studying mathematics before I studied computer science, and in the early 90s, there was research by some ethnographers about what kind of humor do you have at the mathematical department. So they looked at all the folders and the flyers and the things that we wrote on the toilets, the things that we joked about in the canteen. And obviously there was a lot of jokes about imaginary numbers. We all know how funny that is, or how you integrate 0 and things like that. That's very funny. But the interesting thing is that a lot of the jokes that we did, besides those factual jokes that are inherently funny, is that we made jokes about people who did not understand mathematics. And I think that one of the reasons why we did that was that we wanted to feel like we belonged to somewhere. A lot of the people I studied mathematics with, at least at that point in time, they had felt like outsiders in primary school and secondary school. They'd been weird, they'd been nerdy, they hadn't been part of the in-crowd. But now they created their own in-crowd. And the only way to be part of that in-crowd was actually to be able to understand these jokes about maths. So I think there was an actually very important psychological factor to the humor that we had in the math department. It's the same some people do when they joke about C++ programming or JavaScript programming. They're showing that they understand C++ and the problems. They're showing they understand JavaScript and the problems. And they're possibly making other people outsiders, but they feel like they belong together. Also, the jokes about a common enemy that I mentioned before can be very effectful in order to make people feel like they belong together. Of course, you have to be careful about that. You don't want one team to make so much jokes about the other team that they can't work with them. So we have to figure out where the border is. So if we go back to my childhood, you can see that I wasn't using the swing in the way that you're supposed to use a swing. I was a bit weird when I was a child. I was a bit clumsy. And I didn't quite understand why you weren't allowed to be childish and why you had to wear special kinds of clothing. So people were laughing at me a lot. And what I learned very early is that laughing can be used to push people apart. Laughing can be used to bully somebody because you're laughing at somebody who's being bullied. So I started to make jokes about myself, because if I made a joke about myself, I would be laughing at my own joke. Even though it was on my account, I would still be laughing with the others. And that meant that that thing about making fun about myself was what started me having such an interest in what is it actually that you laugh about? How do you create a joke? Now, humor can actually be really negative and really destroying things. And we also know that men who are exposed to sexist humor are more likely to endorse sexist beliefs, to withhold donations from women's organizations, and to have higher endorsements of rape myths. So a joke is not just a joke. It's never a joke. I do believe, sincerely, that stand-up comedians can make jokes about everything they want. But I also believe, sincerely, that whenever there's a joke, it's never just a joke. If somebody's saying, oh, it's just a joke, that joke came from somewhere. It came from a thought in someone's mind. So it was there already before you started laughing at it. So laughter can be fun and humor can be good, but it can also be really bad. Now you can use humor to criticize other people in a nice, playfully teasing way that's called banter in English. And bantering is something that they do a lot in England. That's something that they really like to banter. It's like playful. You can't really be mad about it or sad about it because it's just banter. And let me give you some examples. So this joke is gonna insult like 4 different nationalities, but not Dutch people. So I think it's good to use it here. Which nationality was Ötzi the Iceman? You remember Ötzi? We found him in the glacier, right? He wasn't Italian because he carried tools. He wasn't Austrian since he had brains. He might have been Swiss since he was overtaken by a glacier. But most probably he was North German because nobody else walks in sandals in the mountains. So it's great that you can have just in very few lines, you can insult a lot of people at the same time. Oops, I don't know where that came from. Let's move on. So, how many people here are from Sweden? Right, there. IKEA. So IKEA is Swedish, and you might not know this, but Denmark and Sweden has been in war for years. We've been in war since as long as we can remember. Of course, we ruled over Sweden at some point, and they can't seem to forget that. So IKEA has made some bantering. So for instance, they made a doormat, which is called Køge, which is a city in Denmark. Also made a toilet scene named Maren, which is a very typical Danish name. And so they're doing it. And I think most people don't notice it, but Danish people notice it. It can also be used to pull people together. So it's also good. Let's go back to a fun note. Humor serves the role of a locksmith in platonic and romantic social interactions. Because when we're laughing together, we have all these happiness hormones, and if we have happiness hormones when we're together, then we think we like each other. We might not, but we think we like each other, and that's enough. We perceive funny people as smarter, more attractive, and more personable. And the reason why we perceive them as smarter is because of sexual selection. Because mental fitness indicators such as humor ability may reveal deleterious mutational load, which means, in plain English, if you have a good sense of humor, you don't have a lot of badly mutated genes. Which means if you have a sense of humor, it's good to have children with that person. So there's a lot of pressure to be fun in relationships as well. And if we look at the research about humor in relationships, both men and women seem to prefer somebody with a sense of humor when they are selecting who they want to be in relationship with. But men highlighted the importance of their partner's receptivity to their own humor, whereas women value humor production and receptivity equally. I'm just going to let it stand there. It means that men like women who laugh at their jokes, and women like men who are funny. And research shows that women who are funny don't get more sex than women who are not funny. I have my own personal empirical studies about that. But there are 2 types of laughter. There's a natural laughter that comes from being mentally tickled. Oops, that's half my presentation. Or physically tickled. And I'm going to come back to that mentally tickled again, I'm surprised. And that natural laughter is something that you can't control. It just comes out of you. And then you have the post laughter, the social laughter, that you do, for instance, to show that you belong, or you do to show that you're intelligent enough to understand that joke. And how many of you are younger than 37? You can't tell the difference. statistically significantly can't tell the difference between the post laughter and the real laughter. And that's interesting because if you're on a date with somebody, the likelihood of a second date is completely correlated with how much the woman laughs at the first date. It's not correlated with how much the man laughs at the first date, and we don't know whether it's a causality or a correlation, but it's just how it is. We see the correlation, and I don't know why, and you can think about that, but that's how it is. There's also two different kinds of smiles. There is the fake smiles and the real thing. And you can look in the brain and you can see whether it's a fake smile or a real smile. And you can see whether it's Brodmann's area 4 that lights up, then it's a real smile, or if it's Brodmann area 24 that lights up, then it's a fake smile. And if you look at old movies, you can see that the actors are faking their smiles a lot. And if you're watching these movies now, you're wondering, why are they faking those smiles? They don't look happy at all. This is weird. But that was okay at the time. But now with the method acting, people are actually thinking about something nice, so they are smiling. And by the way, it's a bit weird that we have these places in the brain called Brodmann's area 24, but Brodmann's area 24 was by Brodmann called orbitofrontal cortex gyrus singularis. It's a very clever trick by researchers to call things something really terrible, because then it's just called Brodmann's area 24. Now it's the same with smiles, that you can't tell the difference until you're maybe in the mid-20s or beginning of the 30s. You can't tell the difference. So for those of you who are young in the audience, I want to help you. I brought a picture of a fake smile. You can also take this test, but this is the fake smile. So the next thing is a video. It's only 20 seconds, but I'll urge you to look at the video for the entirety of those 20 seconds. How do you feel? You feel sad? Does anybody feel happy? Are there any psychopaths in the room? Just checking before the party. It's good for everybody to know this. So the interesting thing is that when we are watching somebody who has a facial expression, we are mimicking that person's facial expression. And that is what gives us part of our empathy. That we actually, when we see somebody smile, we smile without thinking about it. When we smile, the facial expression sends like the muscles in the face and the nerve endings in the face sends information to the brain that tells us that now we're happy or now we're sad. And that's a huge part of empathy. Research has shown that people who have Botox injections have less empathy. The first time I heard that, I thought maybe they're just cold bitches to begin with. But there's actually been some real research about this. So, because they thought the same. And so they tried to make research by giving people some sort of cream on their face that would make the muscles not move. And when they had that cream on the face and the muscles couldn't move, they also lost the ability for empathy. And when they put some electrodes on people whose facial muscles wouldn't move on their own, which would sort of send signals to the nerves, then they would get more empathy. So that mimicking of people's facial expressions are actually crucial for us living in a society and actually having empathy with each other. Now, because you're a bit sad, I want to show you a video to make you happy. Just like that. You feel better now, don't you? Great. Don't want to ruin your mood just before the party. So Richard Feynman, you probably know him, a well-known physicist, Nobel Prize winner. He has something he calls kick of the discovery. And what it does is that it explains how we communicate, how we try to parse what people are saying. So imagine that when somebody says the first word of a sentence, you create a tree or a graph in your head, and you try to guess what they're going to say, right? And then they give you the next word, and then of course there's some branches that dies out. It couldn't be this that they're saying, it has to be something else. They give you another word, they give you another word, and for every word there's some branches that are dying, and in the end, you know this is what they're gonna say. These people are a bit boring. But it's how it works with most communication. And it's also how it works if you're Googling. So if you're making a Google search, you know that you put the first words, and in order to help you, Google search is trying to help you. And sometimes you can get pretty insulted about what they're suggesting to you as the first choice. Sometimes they know more about you than they want you to. How can I get... This is less accurate, right? I'm already Danish. And how can I get taller is not actually what I'm looking for. How can I get a... This is interesting. Why is how can I get a girlfriend number 1? How can I get a boyfriend number 5? Is it more urgent for people who are Googling to get a girlfriend than a boyfriend? Yes, it is. Thank you. And then, like in the graph, if you're putting more words, you're getting less options. Sometimes you don't get any options. Google's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. What could this possibly be? Paycheck? So, Kick of the Discovery by Richard Feynman. If people are saying something that you don't expect as the last word, it's a bit like your brain is getting tickled. It's like, you can almost feel it, and that gives you the natural laughter. And then you have to sort of go back into the tree and think, okay, how can I make this work? And so saying something surprising can actually be funny. Now, jokes that I like: Blackadder, Seinfeld, XKCD, Dilbert, sarcasm, irony, and satire. I love all that, really dark humor. Also like anti-jokes. Don't tell the one about Finnish roulette. Who wants me to tell the one about Finnish roulette? Do we have any Finnish people in the room? Oh. Right, so I heard this from somebody else. So Finnish roulette. You all know Russian roulette. Finnish roulette. 2 Russian men go into a sauna, each bringing a bottle of vodka. They both drink their bottle of vodka in the sauna. One of them walks out of the sauna, and the one remaining in the sauna has to guess who left the sauna. It's an anti-joke. I find it tremendously funny. Only about 1% of the population. That's okay. Right. Blackadder quotes that I really like. Am I jumping the gun, Baldric? Or the words, I have a cunning plan, marching with ill-deserved confidence in the direction of this conversation. I love the way that he uses the words, Rowan Atkinson, here. Also, worst ideas, and someone said, yeah, let's take the suspiciously large wooden horse into Troy. Statues all the rage this session. Or my favorite one, Baldric, does it have to be this way? Our valued friendship, ending with me cutting you up into strips and telling the prince that you walked over a very sharp cattle grid in an extremely heavy hat. I really love these jokes. And it's interesting that Rowan Atkinson has done both Blackadder and Mr. Bean. I'm going to show you 2 short videos, one with Blackadder and one with Mr. Bean. And I'm not going to judge who's laughing at which. And it is actually a word. I didn't know it, but it is a word. I really like Blackadder. Let me show you something else. Right, so it's very different. And Rowan Atkinson wanted to create Mr. Bean to see how funny he could be without using words, or with using as few words as possible. And it's an interesting intellectual exercise in humor. If we go back to why you should listen, you wanted to hear the funniest joke in the world, we got that. You're interested in why people laugh and at what. And with 2 minutes to go, how can you be funny? Humor requires mastery of sophisticated functions like self-awareness, empathy, spontaneity, and linguistic subtlety. It's crucial for getting a partner and doing a good talk. No pressure. So that's how you do it. Timing is everything. Some jokes are only funny the first time. The jokes in Mr. Bean are funny every time, because there's no surprising it. It's just laughing at other people. Some people use slides to make sure the timing is right. I asked my teenage children if they wanted me to bring something from Amsterdam. They said, yes, please, cookies and stuff. You can also, I found this one, this is also funny, I think, but we don't have enough time. So how do you be funny? You make a surprise, the kick of the discovery. You make a joke that people laugh at to show that they belong. They start with the social laughter. Maybe it'll turn into a real natural laughter. You make them laugh at something that they can only laugh at if they're clever enough to understand it. You laugh at common animosity. And if it's so easy, then of course artificial intelligence can do it. Let's see what artificial intelligence can do with humor. What you call a cat does it take to screw in a light bulb? They could worry the banana. I'm not worried yet. How did the cowboy buy a frog? Because he didn't have any brains. What do you get when you cross a frog with a street? A Maine toad. What do you get when you cross an object with a mental object? An idea. The trouble is that AI is very good at explaining why things are funny, but explaining a joke is a bit like an autopsy. If the patient wasn't dead already, it surely is afterwards. The oldest jokes in the world that we know about, one of them is from Iraq, 1900 before Christ. It involves an old man, a young woman, and a fart. I'm going to jump to a conclusion here and think it was a man that made this joke up. Another one from the British 10th century, also something about something being kinky and an innuendo. So jokes have been around for a long time. So you can say that you now know how to be funny, you know what people are laughing at, and you've heard the funniest joke in the world. And this is my favorite XKCD cartoon. I'm gonna end on that one. Thank you.